Hey everybody, we're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Erin.
I'm Dr. Kristen.
And we're back with our continuing coverage of Netflix's juggernaut, The Crown. We are up to episode 6, Terra Nullius, which basically introduces us to the storyline around Princess Diana and Prince Charles's trip to Australia in 1983. And all the things that went right and wrong about that trip. This is an entirely royal family episode about a show called The Crown.
Who knew that was such a big ask?
Knock me with a feather. So we get some pretty fascinating insights both to Diana and Charles as humans and as married people, and also into the Queen and her inability to show emotion and be a empathetic mother figure.
And that the Queen Mum is possibly actually a living dinosaur.
Yeah, she's a problem, y'all. So this episode really just starts out with this interesting storyline that the up and coming, and he is elected Prime Minister of Australia, Hawke, is a Republican in that he thinks that there should be a separation between Australia and the British Empire, the British monarchy, and they should have a, kind of a Republic of Australia. This is apparently fictitious. Dr. Kristen, you did some...
Well, I'm not entirely... I don't know how they could make up that he was a Republican. Right. Vulture referred to this storyline as largely contrived.
Okay.
And then I didn't find any other... I tried to look at other recaps, and I tried to Google this a little bit, and it wasn't... When we talk about the Charles and Diana's Australia trip, people don't bring this up as like an element. So I'm wondering if the connection between the two is what is contrived. Australian nationalism is a thing and has been a thing since Australia was conquered by white people. So since Australia was colonized, people have been Australian Republicans. So I don't think that it's fictitious, but I do wonder if the direct...
Like if it was maybe exaggerated a little bit.
I think the direct relationship and the commentary from him.
Got it.
And to be honest, little forward, it wasn't needed for the show at all, for the episode, really.
No, and the way that it's couched is that, there's this upswing in support for Australian nationalism in advance of this visit from Charles and Diana. And so they're, brought in to meet mom and dad and to put all the pressure on them. Like, this trip has to go really well. We can't lose Australia or New Zealand. Like, you guys have to be really successful. So I think it was used as that kind of mechanism, but I think they knew that
I'm not sure we needed the focus, but anyway, neither here nor there.
Neither here nor there.
He's largely contrived, but I doubt he wasn't a Republican. They're big on making things up. That feels extreme for them.
That feels extreme. So they land in Australia. They quabble over whether William will be with them. The fact that she wanted to take baby William on the trip at all was controversial. And they're really butting heads for the first half of the episode. Until, and Diana hashes a speech at the press conference when they arrive, and Charles is embarrassed and he calls Camilla and he's whining and all the normal stuff we're used to for their marriage. And then they decide to go and visit William over Easter and kind of collect him. And they have this amazing conversation, actually, that they probably should have had before they got married. And the real conversation about the state of their marriage and how Charles feels. And we'll get into more of that after the recap. But all of a sudden, the light switch is flipped and they're all happy and smiles and winning over the public. And aren't they the most romantic couple ever? Diana is getting crowds and crowds of people. And very soon that backfires. Because as we learn in this episode, the one thing Charles does not want to be is ignored and overlooked, because that's how he feels he was treated his whole life. And then he marries a literal superstar. And on the trip that was supposed to be his big coming out party, he is literally booed. So that ends the trip not really great. We get them like they're no longer simpatico. He goes off to Highgrove. She goes to Kensington. She wants to see the Queen because in her mind this trip was a disaster, and shows up and the Queen's like, what do you mean? It was fine. Look at all these positive headlines. You guys did a great job. Australia is no longer talking about breaking with the monarchy. And so it's not great for our Diana. She, at the end of the episode, is really distraught. We see throughout this episode, again, her struggle with bulimia. And it's brought to the Queen's attention, and Charles brings it up with her. And it's very clear at the end of the episode that, you know, this is going to be something that she will continue to struggle with. And then we get an interesting and upsetting conversation to end the episode with Lizzie, Margaret, Queen Mum, and Anne, in which the Queen Mum really just shows that she is an immovable force. And anytime Elizabeth might have an idea of, oh, maybe I should be empathetic or more human towards my children, the Queen Mum's like, no, like that good old stiff upper lips. Diana just needs to suck it up. She needs to bend to fit into the family, and if she doesn't bend, she will break. So that's where we leave the episode, obviously knowing like that eventually she will break in terms of her relationship with the royal family and her role as the Princess of Wales. So that's our recap. There was a lot in this episode. I found it fascinating. This is the show I wish they were making all the time. We both agreed offline, like the strongest episode of this season, because it provides us with, whether fictitious or not, fascinating insights into these humans.
Yeah, I have no idea if in real life Princess Margaret is the voice of reason, but that is the role they have assigned her in this season. And Helena Bonham Carter is just eating out on it. And I love every time Margaret shows up on screen, I'm going to be entertained this season.
Right.
I know that the next episode is entirely a Margaret-centric episode, so I may feel differently with that much focus on her. I don't know.
In previous incarnations, we were not in love with all the Margaret of the first two seasons. So, but they've backed off on that considerably.
Yeah. And so I, don't know about episode 7. Tune back in when we cover that one. But in this episode, she was perfect because it reminds us that she is really Elizabeth's only friend. Mm-hmm. And that I think by giving validation to Elizabeth's, it's going to help lay the groundwork. Now, this point was brought up by Vulture, and they are not the only ones to bring it up. We're not the only ones to bring it up. But this is the episode that reminds us all that Diana had to walk so that Kate and Meghan could fly. And that the conversation that Diana has with the Queen at the end of the episode.
In terms of their relationship with, we should say, in terms of their relationship with the Queen.
With the Queen, yes. Yeah. In terms of their the marriage of their humanity and their royalness.
Yeah.
And how Elizabeth reacted to preparing those women to come into the family.
Yeah, 100%.
By all accounts. We'll call our personal friend Meghan Markle a double check, but this is by all accounts.
I've got her on the speed dial.
Not a problem. The slow evolution of Elizabeth from Elizabeth Windsor to Elizabeth Regina back to Elizabeth Windsor towards the end of her life, or towards a balance. I think this entire portion of Diana's life is a big part of what will eventually build the tipping point.
Yeah.
And I appreciated the showing of that in this episode, factual or not. Obviously, when we talk about in Andrew Morton's book that Diana essentially wrote for him, she talks quite a lot about conversations she had with the Queen, and that, so we only have Diana's side officially. And it's obvious that their relationship was frosty, mm-hmm. but that the Queen didn't want it to be, but didn't know what else to do. And if I'm trusting Peter Morgan in this, it's because the Queen Mom's the worst.
Yeah, and like I was telling Dr. Kristen, I oftentimes, this might be an overshare, but I don't think it is, have some of my best thoughts when I'm in the shower. And I was in the shower this morning and I had this light bulb about this episode. And so I came upstairs and opened up my notes and typed this whole thing, that like what I learned from this episode was that the queen does not know how to separate the monarch from the mother.
Not
And
at all.
she never really knew how to be a mother after she became a monarch. Like, if you remember in the first season when her and Charles were living in like Malta, or I'm sorry, Philip were living in like, he was stationed in somewhere in the
Yeah, I
Mediterranean.
think Malta, and there was the royal yacht was involved, and they were
Yeah, and like they were just this delightful married couple with two small kids, and she was like the doting wife and mother, which is actually what she always wanted to be. And then her father became ill and died very suddenly, and all of a sudden she like arrested at that point in her emotional development, and she no longer knew how to be a mother and a monarch, because she's been raised since she was 8 that she was going to be the monarch. So she knew how to do that. And she knew how to be a mother, but like she didn't know how to do them at the same time. And so then you get what happens with Charles and Anne, is she treats them as objects of the monarchy, not as human beings. And we're seeing like this season is doing a really great job of, in small ways, showing the ramifications of that. And in this episode, like big ways, right? With what we learn about Charles's personality. But we also see that like she can't really perceive of how actions are good or bad outside of how they benefit the crown. Which
true, because her primary identity at all times is Elizabeth Regina.
Elizabeth Regina, and her whole life, literally whole life, has been in service of the crown and maintaining it, preserving it, continuing it, like having children so that they can continue the monarchy. So she struggles with how Diana doesn't fit in this mold of only wanting to serve the crown. And we are led to believe in this episode by the end that it might have something to do with how she was raised by her mother.
I mean, we've talked a lot about Charles and Philip because the show has given us a lot about Charles and Philip.
I would love episodes about Elizabeth and the Queen Mother. Episodes.
The bitterness that drives the Queen Mom's life about the abdication, I don't think has been explored as much as it could be. That everything in that woman's mind comes back to that she is like put upon because she became the queen. It's very clear that, to me, that once that happened, that was the end of her humanity. Like she couldn't.
And if you think about it, right, like that was a selfish, like in their framework, that was a selfish thing that he did. And you aren't selfish.
Oh, in my framework too, by the way.
Like, like in my framework too, but certainly in the way that they see their role.
He abdicated service and he betrayed the family and the family calling, and
And so, like, if you want to talk about, events in your life that arrest you emotionally, that is certainly would make sense that arrested the Queen Mother.
Oh no, that's the abdication is her villain origin story.
Yeah.
Like that's
because she knew, like, as Elizabeth, her role was, she was not the queen. She was, the queen consort. Her job as a person in that role was to produce an heir, and she did. And then her heir was like, meh, not so much. It's not for me, Mom. Saws. And so,
we're doing we're two above. So the Queen Mum is the sister-in-law of the one who abdicated.
Oh yeah, that's right. She's Elizabeth's mom. Never mind. Sorry.
No, but still, she was raised to be the second son's wife, to be a royal, but to be normal.
Yeah.
In her definition of normal, which is outdoorsy and hunting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I apologize, viewers, that I was confusing my royal lineage there.
They're all named Elizabeth, so it's fine. Elizabeth and Mary, they all have the same names. But like, it's still a valid thing.
Yeah.
Her expectations were very specific, and everything was pretty set, and everything was fine. And then this incredibly selfish man abdicated, this incredibly selfish Nazi abdicated for a woman that made no sense. They had no relationship with, and betrayed everything about.
Yeah, and so like that is her framework for being launched into this position of like, I did not marry the first in line, I married the second in line, and now all of a sudden I'm the queen consort, and I will raise my children to be,
Protect the family.
yeah, to never abdicate
Consider.
service ever. And so like it totally makes sense as we're talking through this now that like she raised a daughter that cannot really see humanity.
Because humanity falling in love is what ruined their lives.
Is a weakness. Yeah, it's 100% a weakness. And it makes sense that Margaret is because siblings are so often reactions to each other, that Margaret like saw robot Elizabeth, not that she's a robot, but you know, like the one that doesn't see humanity as much. And she was like, no, I am going to be all these things.
I'm going to be all the humanity for you.
Yeah. I will take that mantle for us all.
Don't you worry. So then we have a Diana coming along.
Yeah.
Who is always a human because she doesn't know how else to be, because she and Charles actually had very similar childhoods. They were both largely abandoned. Diana, it's pretty well documented that her parents had a really ugly divorce. She and her siblings, she and her brother especially, basically, I think she only had, Sarah, the one that dated Charles, isn't really in this. Yeah. But her and her brother raised themselves.
Yeah, and like we don't get any insight into her mother, but like she did not have a great relationship with her mother in real life.
No, by all accounts. And so this could have been their true bonding, which is why they're both pendulum swing parents, which is why they're both great parents, because oh my gosh, we have to focus on this child because we know what it's like to be not focused on.
Yeah, and like it made me so sad because I thought that the conversation that they had when they went to find William was beautiful. Mm-hmm. And really like raw and vulnerable, and it made me so sad because I was like, this is not gonna work, but you guys think right now in this moment it is, and I wanted to, and then like, but she was always going to be the superstar, right? And that was always going to be the thing that he was going to resent the most.
She was always going to be, this is somebody in one of the recaps I read said like for a normal couple this would be when they could be like, right, okay, but we're never going to be able to live in this, so this is where we say goodbye.
This is the point where Harry and Meghan go, let's move to Los Angeles.
Yeah. You know what we don't care about? Our titles. But like, so this is the moment where like you're already on a tea towel, sis.
There's 60,000 people coming to see you in Brisbane. Like, you're in this now.
You're in this now. Like, you know.
And you know, we could talk about really the differences between Harry and William, in that like there was more like that choice that Harry and Meghan made was never going to be a possible choice for William and Kate. And like William knew that, but he also was given the space to find someone who also knew that.
Like, yeah, we were just discussing how incredibly quick Charles and Diana's engagement was compared to Will and Kate's. Like,
and all these conversations that you're forced into having because your marriage is crumbling. One of you has an eating disorder. The other one is cheating. And like, you should have hashed all of this out before you even got engaged to make sure that like you could sign up to the life that Charles was going to have.
It's just so.
And it was such a disservice to both of them to not do that.
There's a really great podcast that I listened to called You're Wrong About, and they did a 5-episode stint on Diana that we will link in the show notes because it's very good. Michael Hobbs is one of the hosts of that, and he says that fame is a human rights violation. And that because what it does, and that sounds hyperbolic, I get it. And he says the same thing. He's like, I get it. They have resources and blah, 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 blah. He goes, but the most fundamental thing about humanity is choice. Mm-hmm. That's the most fundamental thing we can be given. And none of these people have choices in their lives. And like fame, royalty and fame are human rights violations. Mm-hmm. And that has been going around in my brain. I think I heard him use that phrase 2 weeks ago. And that just bottled around my brain in this episode. Diana's life is a human rights violation.
Yeah. And like,
and so's Charles's.
It was set up to fail, really. When you don't have these conversations, when you don't like and we talked about this offline, like in a way, treat it like a business transaction, because like you aren't going to have the freedom to get out of it. I mean, granted, we know Charles and Diana get a divorce, but like
But she never really gets out of it because she gave birth to the King of England, the future King of England. Like,
yeah, yeah. And so it's like you should sit down and have like a real pragmatic conversation about what this needs to look like and how you were raised and how you like. This is why we have marriage counselors. This is why we have like, so that people can have honest conversations about how do you want to raise a child? How do you want to raise a child? How do you see our lives going?
and let me say too, I believe that Charles did love Diana.
I do
And
too.
I believe when he says it in that conversation, he's not being
it.
mean, he's not being manipulative. I do believe he loves her.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is their love wasn't love is not ever actually enough. There
Sorry to burst that bubble.
It always wins, but it's not always enough.
Oh,
The negotiated, built relationship that comes with a covenantal, constantly lived and worked on relationship can take that love and help it survive everything they went through.
yeah.
It's because they didn't have that other bit. They had no foundation. That love was the Band-Aid on the bullet hole.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't as much that maybe he loved Camilla and he loved Camilla more. It's that he loved Camilla more deeply.
Mm.
And he had more,
and they had a relationship.
They had more skill set with each, like they had the tools to keep going, and like
they had a foundation that their relationship was built on. And like Diana and Charles' relationship was built on a fairy tale.
Additionally, they have nothing in common. Like they share no hobbies. Like my husband and I don't share a ton of hobbies, but we have a couple.
But you have things that you enjoy to do together.
And let me tell you, that's real helpful.
Goes a long way, kids.
It's really, really helpful. Like when I was deciding whether or not to marry my husband, one of the things I had to figure out we could do together was travel, because it was super important to me.
Yeah.
And so like we did an intentional, and I remember telling Aaron, this is an experimental trip. If we fight the whole time, I'm breaking up with him. Like that's it. We had a fantastic trip. We travel really well together. And I was like, okay, this is a big part of
how I want to build
a life,
building a life with someone. Yeah. So I was just, I'm fascinated by this discussion that we're having and what this episode has brought out in terms of how all the layers that we're able to peel back.
Which
about.
Is why I want every episode to be like this.
And, you know, to kind of connect it to our conversation about episode 5 and Fagin that seemed so out of place. This episode, in not as an overt way, is still really about like parenting and motherhood. And so it would have been so strong to connect favorites to this. And it was like there was, you know, narrative whiplash again, that like the previous episode was not the one in which you force the queen to think about how she's raised these children. The previous episode was about a man named Michael Fagin. But, you know,
and the potential collapse of the British social state.
Right. But Peter Morgan needed to address the economics of the 1980s. So box ticked. But yeah, for me, that was I was just like, where did this episode did not feel like it worked with the last episode, but it did feel like it worked with some of the meta narrative stuff that he's trying to do.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I can't ever. He wants to tell a chronological story, which is great. We know that we will end this season in November of 1990. So this season is the 80s. There's probably 900 episodes worth of content in Britain for the 1980s. And we just don't always understand why he chooses what he chooses.
Correct.
But we're super glad he chose this.
Yeah.
And we will link that episode in that podcast in the show notes for people who want more Diana all the time and a little bit more background. There are 2 major books on her. One was written entirely by her, and one is a very catty tea spilling book. And those are kind of the 2 major ones. And that's where we get a lot of the, by all accounts, stuff that we've been saying. But I think we all know that the Windsor family will remain a mystery, unless Harry gets permission to do a tell-all, which I mean, I think I would pre-order that so fast my head would actually spin.
Yeah, I also don't know that he's going to.
No, I don't think he wants to because
Yeah.
no, that's what I'm saying. Like, hey,
Yeah.
like he's the only one in a position to know a lot of this stuff. And I don't think he's talking. And to be completely honest, I'm glad he's not, because like it's not our business.
No, and like as fascinated as we are to have these conversations and to discuss these people who are real humans, and there's bits of them that are factual in this series and lots of bits of them that aren't because we only know so much. Like I think it, at certain stage they deserve their privacy and just get to be human beings. And the more I watch this season, the more I could not be thrilled for William and Harry and the lives that they were given and the way that they were raised by two loving parents and the kind of humans that they have been allowed to be and bringing humanity to the royal family in a way that nobody had done before their mother. And like it's just really cool to think about now, which I didn't have a lot of this context coming into this season, whether it's factual or not. What we do know about those boys is factual, and I could not be more delighted.
I am constantly glad when people get to take the best parts of their family and reshape the worst parts of them. And it certainly appears that that is what William and Harry have been able to do with their families. And if as long as William and Kate keep putting out the world's cutest Christmas cards, like really, I have zero complaints. So
their children are the cutest children I've ever seen.
Like created in a workshop to look perfectly British. It's really like they're a walking like Waitrose ad. Like it's really, really something. Like
they are a Sainsbury's advert.
Oh my gosh.
Like it's yeah.
Yeah.
I love that like one of the little things that they decided of Kate's humanity was her love of photography, and that any official portrait of their kids she has taken. It's one of my favorite details about them, and she takes great photographs. And I love that they share silly ones of their kids and the official ones. But that's one of my favorite things that I smile whenever I see those pictures because I'm like, meh, taken with love.
So looking at the episode summaries for the rest of the series, I'm not sure we'll love the upcoming episodes quite as much. Warning.
I'm nervous.
But we will cover them no matter what, even if we have to cover them like this. I will tell you guys right now that I know what's coming with the Phantom of the Opera thing, and I'm not happy. I'm not happy to sit through it.
The sacrifices we make for you guys.
I had to watch it in a theater class once, and we all went, like, as a group. So not that she was bad, but because it was cringe. She had quite a lovely singing voice, but like,
I think there's a lot of, as we, obviously this season is going to get the destruction of Charles and Diana's marriage. So there's a whole lot of heaps of cringe coming.
And we don't love secondary cringe, but we will soldier on for all of you. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the next coverage of The Crown. Bye.
Bye.